My name is Reid, 32 years old, standing alone at my brother Michael's police memorial. Dad positioned me in the back row, away from the real officers, paying respects to their fallen comrade. "Remember your place, Tara. You are just a dispatcher," he whispered harshly, straightening his retired police chief uniform. "This day is about Michael, our hero." I nodded silently, the weight of my FBI badge hidden in my pocket growing heavier by the second. Nobody in my family knew my real job until 3 men in dark suits entered the church and one called out, "Agent Reid, we need you immediately." If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like button. And subscribe to hear how my father's face transformed when he discovered who I really am. Growing up as a Reid meant one thing: you were destined to wear the blue uniform. My family tree resembled a police department organizational chart more than a family lineage. My grandfather joined the force in 1952, patrolling the streets of our small Pennsylvania town for 37 years. Dad followed his footsteps almost to the exact day, joining the academy the week after his 19th birthday. By the time I was born, he had already made detective. By the time I started high school, he was deputy chief. The Reid name carried weight in law enforcement circles across 3 counties. Reid's run toward danger while others run away. Dad would remind us at dinner, his badge gleaming on the table where he always placed it during meals. It is in our blood. Michael, my older brother by 4 years, absorbed every word like gospel. From the moment he could walk, he wanted to be just like Dad. His childhood toys were exclusively police cars and plastic badges. For career day in 2nd grade, he wore Dad's old uniform shirt that hung to his knees. By high school, he was already enrolled in the Police Explorers program, learning protocol and procedures while his classmates were playing video games. I loved my brother fiercely. Michael was my protector, my confidant, and often my interpreter when Dad's expectations became too cryptic for me to decipher. While he embraced the visible, public-facing aspects of police work that Dad celebrated, I found myself drawn to the investigative side. "Mikey gets to ride in the patrol car, why can I not go?" I asked Dad once when I was 9. "Because he is going to be an officer someday," Dad replied without looking up from his case files. "He needs to learn how it works." "I want to be an officer too," I declared, standing as tall as my small frame would allow. Dad finally glanced up, his expression a mixture of amusement and dismissal. "Girls can be officers, sure. But you are too quiet, too bookish. You do not have the temperament for real police work." That was the first time I felt the sting of his dismissal, but it would not be the last. As I grew older, my interest shifted from patrol work to the investigative aspects of law enforcement. I would pore over Dad's case files when he left them on the dining room table, fascinated by the patterns and connections between seemingly unrelated events. "She has a good eye." I overheard our neighbor, Detective Martinez, tell my father once after I had spotted a detail in a case photo that they had missed. "Book smarts," Dad replied dismissively. "Real police work happens on the streets, not behind a desk." That phrase, real police work, became the measuring stick against which all career choices in our family were judged. And by that measure, anything I showed interest in fell short. My mother, Caroline Reid, tried to mediate these tensions in her gentle way. A nurse who had met my father when he brought in a suspect for treatment, she understood both worlds, the adrenaline of emergency response and the quiet, methodical work that happened behind the scenes. "Your father just wants you to be safe," she would explain after particularly difficult conversations about my future. "He has seen what happens on the streets, but he lets Michael do it," I would counter. "That is different," she would say, though she could never quite articulate how. Even my strongest advocate ultimately deferred to Dad's judgment. The defining moment came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to Georgetown University with a partial scholarship to study criminal justice with a focus on forensic psychology. The same week, Michael had been accepted to the police academy. At dinner that night, Dad raised his glass in a toast to Michael, continuing the Reid tradition of real police work. Academy today, detective badge tomorrow. Everyone clinked glasses. No mention was made of my achievement until Mom gently prompted, and Tara has some news too. Oh, right, Dad said, as if just remembering. Georgetown, was it? Good school. Criminal justice program, I added, hoping this focus might finally earn his approval. I want to work in behavioral analysis, maybe eventually the FBI. Dad chuckled. The FBI. Big dreams. Well, college is good. You can always get a job as a dispatcher or administrator if the fancy degree does not work out. Support roles are important too. In that moment, I understood my place in the Reid family hierarchy. Michael was the heir to the legacy, the one who would carry the badge. I was the contingency plan, the support staff, the one whose service would always be qualified as important too, rather than important in its own right. Despite this, Michael never treated me as secondary. They just do not get it, Tara. He told me the night before I left for college. You are going to outrank all of us someday. Just do not forget the little people when you are running the show. His faith in me was unwavering, even when my own faltered. But neither of us could have predicted how prophetic his words would become, or the circumstances under which they would prove true. After graduating from Georgetown with honors, I faced the reality that my academic achievements meant little in the eyes of my family without the accompanying badge and uniform. In a moment of weakness, or perhaps strategic calculation, I applied for a position as a police dispatcher in my hometown. Now that is practical, Dad said when I told him. The first genuine approval I had heard from him regarding my career choices. Good benefits, close to home, and you will learn how real police work functions from the inside. For 2 years, I sat behind the dispatch console, coordinating responses and managing emergency communications. The work was important but unfulfilling for someone with my training. I found myself analyzing call patterns in my spare time, creating maps of incident types and frequency that nobody had asked for. It was one of these unsolicited analyses that changed everything. You did this? Asked Lieutenant Granger, studying the detailed breakdown of drug-related calls I had compiled, showing clear patterns pointing to distribution networks across jurisdictions. Just something I noticed, I replied, suddenly self-conscious about overstepping my role. This is exactly what the regional task force has been trying to piece together for months, he said, looking at me with new interest. Where did you learn to do this kind of analysis? Within weeks, my reports were being shared with agencies across county lines. Though officially still just a dispatcher, I was quietly being consulted on investigative strategies. One such report made its way to the FBI field office in Philadelphia, and with it, my name. Agent Diana Foster contacted me on a Tuesday afternoon. Ms. Reid, I would like to discuss your analytical work over coffee, she said, offering few details. 2 days later, sitting in a quiet cafe 20 miles from my hometown, I learned that the FBI had been tracking the same networks my analysis had identified. Your educational background combined with your practical experience is impressive, Agent Foster said. Have you ever considered applying to the Bureau? 3 months later, I received the official acceptance to the FBI Academy at Quantico. Standing in my apartment with the letter in hand, I faced the first major decision of my career: tell my family the truth, or maintain a cover that would avoid the inevitable dismissal from my father. I chose the path of least resistance. I am transferring to a federal dispatch position, I told them over Sunday dinner. Better pay, more responsibility. Dad nodded approvingly. Government benefits are good. Solid career move. Will you be home for the 4th of July parade? Mom asked. More concerned with practicalities than prestige. Let us hope they give you some vacation time, Michael added, the only one to offer congratulations. Only later, as I was leaving, did Dad deliver his parting assessment. At least Michael is doing something important. Not everyone is cut out for the front lines. I smiled tightly and said nothing, already mentally packing for Quantico. The FBI training was rigorous, challenging me physically and mentally in ways that finally felt fulfilling. I excelled in investigative techniques, behavioral analysis, and tactical operations. By graduation, I had been recruited for a specialized counterterrorism unit focusing on domestic threats with international connections. Over the next 6 years, I rose through the ranks, eventually leading a team focused on cartel operations along the East Coast. The classified nature of my work provided the perfect cover for the vague explanations I gave my family about my dispatch management position. She works with computers for the government. I once overheard Dad tell a former colleague at a family barbecue. Not exciting stuff, but it pays the bills. Michael knew the truth. During a case that brought me near our hometown, I had confided in him over drinks. "Holy shit, Tara," he had whispered, eyes wide. "You are a real-life spy." "Not a spy," I corrected. "Intelligence analyst and field agent." "Does Dad know?" I shook my head. "And he cannot." "Not yet. Most of my work is classified." Michael understood without further explanation. "Your secret is safe with me. But someday, I want to be there when he finds out. His face will be priceless." That promise became a private joke between us, a future moment we both looked forward to under better circumstances. Neither of us could have imagined how that revelation would actually occur. Within my FBI team, I found the respect and recognition that had been absent in my family life. Agent Desmond Murray, my direct supervisor, valued my analytical mind and intuitive leaps. My colleagues looked to me for guidance on complex cases. I built a reputation as someone who could see patterns others missed. "Reid has a sixth sense for when something does not fit" became a common refrain in our office. For the first time, I felt fully valued for my actual skills rather than measured against some arbitrary standard of real service. The irony that I had found this validation by hiding a significant part of my identity from my family was not lost on me. The only shadow over this period of professional growth was the increasing distance between my true self and the version my family knew. Holiday visits became exercises in careful omission. Questions about my work were deflected with vague references to dispatch protocols and communication systems. Only with Michael could I occasionally share genuine stories, carefully scrubbed of classified details, but still recognizable as the work of an agent rather than a dispatcher. These rare moments of authenticity made the broader deception bearable. Then came the call that would shatter everything, both my carefully constructed dual life and our family itself. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember checking the time on my bedside clock, the glowing numbers momentarily disorienting me as I reached for my phone. Unknown numbers at this hour usually meant work, a development in a case that could not wait until morning. Instead, I heard my mother's voice, shattered and barely recognizable. "Tara, you need to come home. It is Michael. He is gone." The world tilted on its axis. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "A drug bust went wrong. He was shot." Her voice broke completely. "He did not make it." The next hours passed in a blur of automated actions, calling my supervisor to request emergency leave, booking the first flight to Pennsylvania, packing a bag with no memory of what I put in it. Somewhere in this mechanical sequence, details began filtering through. Michael had been part of a multi-agency operation targeting a distribution hub connected to the Sinaloa cartel. The same cartel my team had been tracking for the past 11 months. As the plane took off, a sickening realization settled over me. I knew details about this operation that even Michael's direct superiors might not have known. Intelligence my team had gathered had likely informed the raid that took my brother's life. Information that, due to compartmentalization protocols, I had never been able to share with him. Landing in Pittsburgh, I rented a car for the drive to my hometown. using the 2 hours to compose myself and prepare for the role I would need to play, grieving sister. Yes, but not FBI agent Reid, who had insight into the broader operation. Just Tara the dispatcher, returning home for her brother's funeral. The family home looked exactly as it always had, American flag flying, Michael's police cruiser in the driveway alongside Dad's truck. Mom met me at the door, her face aged a decade in a day. We held each other without words, the shared grief too vast for language. Dad sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by photographs of Michael in uniform, methodically organizing them into what I would later learn was a display for the memorial service. He looked up briefly when I entered. "You made good time," he said, before returning to his task. No hug, no shared grief. Just a practical acknowledgement of my arrival time. "How are you holding up, Dad?" I asked, setting my bag down. "Doing what needs to be done," he replied without looking up. "Michael deserves a proper service, one that honors his sacrifice." The word sacrifice hung in the air between us. In our family lexicon, it had always been reserved for those on the front lines, those doing real police work. Now it had taken on a terrible new meaning. "The department is handling most of the arrangements," he continued. "Full honors, as befits an officer fallen in the line of duty." The chief asked if you wanted to say a few words as his sister. "Of course I do," I said, surprised he needed to ask. Dad finally looked up, his expression a complex mixture of grief and something else, perhaps assessment. "Keep it brief. There will be a lot of officers wanting to speak about working with him. His real colleagues." And there it was, the familiar diminishment. Even in grief, even after flying across the country to mourn my only brother, I was still secondary. Still not quite belonging to this world he had built. "I will keep that in mind," I said quietly, too exhausted to challenge him. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity. The memorial service had expanded beyond the original plans, with officers from departments across the state planning to attend. Michael had been popular. His work on the drug task force respected across jurisdictions. While Dad coordinated with the police department, I found myself handling the civilian aspects, notifying distant relatives, arranging accommodations for out-of-town guests, selecting music that Michael would have liked. Mom moved through these days in a fog of grief, functioning but barely present. On the evening before the service, I found the memorial program on the kitchen counter. Flipping through it, I noticed my name appeared only once, in the list of surviving family members. I was not included among those presenting tributes, despite the chief's apparent inquiry. When I asked Dad about this omission, his response was immediate and defensive. The program was getting too long. We had to prioritize those who served with him. "I am his sister," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "His only sibling. And you will be recognized as such," he replied. "But the memorial is about honoring his service as an officer. I thought you would understand that." Before I could respond, his phone rang, another call about the arrangements. As he stepped away to take it, I stood alone in the kitchen, a familiar isolation settling over me. Even in death, Michael remained the son who mattered most. That night, my FBI phone vibrated with a message from Agent Murray. Targeted hit confirmed. Cartel connection verified. Security concerns for memorial. Call ASAP. Slipping outside to the backyard of my childhood home, I returned the call, keeping my voice low. "What do we know?" I asked without preamble. "Michael's team got closer than anyone realized," Murray explained. "The bust wasn't random. They were about to expose a direct pipeline from Sinaloa to the East Coast. Our intelligence suggests cartel representatives might attend the memorial for surveillance purposes." My blood ran cold. "You think they would make a move at a police funeral?" "Not an attack," Murray clarified. "Information gathering. Identifying officers connected to the investigation. Standard cartel procedure when they lose a distribution hub." "I will keep my eyes open," I promised. the professional agent temporarily overtaking the grieving sister. "We are sending a team," Murray added. "Plain clothes, low profile. Just as precaution." After ending the call, I stood in the dark yard where Michael and I had played as children, where he had taught me to throw a proper punch, where we had mapped out constellations on summer nights. Now I would attend his memorial not just as his sister, not just as the family afterthought, but as an FBI agent watching for cartel observers, and no one could know. Dad's instructions the next morning only reinforced the role I was expected to play. "Stay in the background today," he said as we prepared to leave for the church. "This will be emotional for everyone. The less disruption, the better." The subtext was clear. Do not embarrass us. Do not draw attention. Know your place. For the first time since receiving news of Michael's death, I felt something break through the numb shock of grief. A spark of anger, familiar, but usually suppressed, flickered to life. But today was about Michael. I would play my part, stand where I was told to stand, say what little I was permitted to say. I would honor my brother. And I would watch the crowd for faces that did not belong, for eyes that studied rather than grieved, for the cartel presence that my family would never know to look for. As we drove to the church, I thought about the last conversation I had with Michael, just 3 weeks earlier. We had met for dinner while I was in Pittsburgh for a case I could not tell him about. "Someday," he had said as we parted, "Dad is going to learn what you really do. And when that happens, I want front row seats to that show. It would certainly make family dinners more interesting." I had replied, "I will help him understand," Michael promised. "When the time is right." Now that time would never come. Or so I thought. The memorial service for Officer Michael Reid was held at St. Mary's Cathedral, the largest church in our hometown. By 9:30 in the morning, the parking lot overflowed with patrol cars from departments across 3 states. A sea of blue uniforms moved solemnly up the church steps, each officer's badge wrapped with the thin black band of mourning. Our family arrived through a side entrance, ushered in by the police chaplain and the department's ceremonial team. Michael's casket had already been positioned at the front of the church, draped with the American flag, his dress uniform hat, and white gloves placed precisely atop it. The sight hit me with physical force, making Michael's death real in a way that the preceding days had not. Dad moved with rigid military bearing, his face expressionless save for the muscle occasionally twitching in his jaw. Mom leaned heavily on my arm, her grief too vast to be contained by the stoic Reid family tradition. I guided her gently to the front pew reserved for immediate family, scanning the gathering crowd with both the eyes of a mourning sister and the trained awareness of an FBI agent. As we took our seats, Dad repositioned himself, placing Mom between us. Whether this was coincidental or a deliberate buffer, the effect was the same. I sat at the end of the family row, partially separated from them. The physical arrangement perfectly mirrored our emotional reality. "Remember, keep it together," Dad murmured to both of us, though his eyes rested longer on me. "Today is about honoring Michael's sacrifice properly." The service began with the posting of colors by the Police Honor Guard, followed by the national anthem. Throughout the opening ceremonies, I continued my discreet surveillance of the attendees. Most were clearly law enforcement or family friends, their grief genuine and visible. But 3 men in the back, dressed in appropriate dark suits, but sitting slightly apart from others, triggered my professional instincts. Their attention seemed focused less on the service and more on cataloging the officers in attendance. The eulogies began with Michael's police chief, who spoke of dedication and the ultimate sacrifice. Following him was Michael's partner, Detective Rodriguez, whose composed recounting of their last conversation broke only once, when describing how Michael had shown him pictures of my recent visit. "He was so proud of his sister," Rodriguez said, glancing toward our family pew. "Always talking about how smart she was." I felt Dad stiffen beside Mom at this unexpected mention, This deviation from the narrative of Michael as solely belonging to the police brotherhood. Next came Dad's turn at the podium. Drawing himself to his full height, the retired police chief addressed the gathering with the authority of both professional rank and paternal grief. My son followed in a proud tradition of Reid men who have worn the badge, he began, his voice steady. 3 generations of service, of running toward danger while others run away. He spoke of Michael's childhood determination to become an officer, his graduation from the academy, his rapid rise through the ranks. Every anecdote reinforced the central theme. Michael was a true Reid, doing the real work of law enforcement. He leaves behind his mother Caroline, who supported his dangerous career with the quiet courage only a police wife understands. Dad continued. And his sister Tara, who works as a police dispatcher in the federal system. That was it. My entire existence and contribution to the family legacy summed up in a partial job description. Not even accurate, but close enough in Dad's mind to not warrant further detail. As Dad returned to his seat, I fought to maintain my composed expression. The familiar hurt mingled with my grief, creating a toxic brew that threatened to overflow. Mom reached for my hand, perhaps sensing my struggle, but Dad immediately required her attention, asking for a tissue. The service continued with more tributes from fellow officers. From my position, I could see the 3 men I had noticed earlier shifting positions, moving to different vantage points around the periphery of the church. Their behavior confirmed my suspicions. They were cataloging faces, particularly those of plainclothes detectives who might be involved in ongoing investigations. During a hymn, I discreetly sent a text to Agent Murray's team, describing the suspects' positions and movements. Seconds later, I received confirmation. Identified. Known associates. Team in position. As the formal service transitioned to the presentation of Michael's badge to our mother, the church doors at the back opened quietly. 3 men and 2 women entered. Their dark suits and subtle earpieces identifying them immediately to my trained eye, though they would appear as merely late attendees to civilians. The FBI team had arrived. Agent Murray himself led the group, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. A slight nod conveyed all I needed to know. They had identified the cartel observers and were monitoring the situation. Dad was now receiving the folded flag that had draped Michael's casket, his face finally betraying emotion as he clutched the triangular package to his chest. In this moment of vulnerability, I felt my anger soften. Whatever our differences, his grief was as real as mine. The final speaker was the mayor, who announced the posthumous awarding of the Medal of Valor to Officer Michael Reid. As he invited our family to stand for recognition, Dad motioned for me to stay seated. Just immediate family for this part, he whispered. I felt as though I had been slapped. I am immediate family, I responded, loud enough that several nearby officers turned to look. Dad's expression hardened. Do not make a scene, Tara. Not today. Something in me finally broke. The cumulative weight of years being diminished, combined with grief and professional tension, pushed me past my normal threshold of compliance. I stood anyway, taking my place beside my mother as the mayor presented the medal. From this new vantage point, I had a clearer view of the cartel observers. One was now openly photographing the ceremony with a small camera, ostensibly as any attendee might, but with his lens focused more on the gathered officers than the proceedings. At that moment, Agent Murray made direct eye contact with me from across the church. A subtle gesture indicated he needed to speak with me. The team was ready to move. As the formal portion of the memorial service concluded and attendees began to move toward the reception area, I felt the familiar tension of operating in 2 worlds simultaneously. The grieving sister needed to stay with family, accepting condolences and honoring Michael's memory. The FBI agent needed to respond to Murray's signal and address the security threat that most people in the room were completely unaware of. Dad's voice cut through my internal conflict. We will receive condolences as a family, he instructed, positioning himself and Mom at the head of the receiving line. "Tara, perhaps you could help with the guest book. Make yourself useful somewhere in the back." The dismissal was so practiced, so casual in its diminishment, that under normal circumstances I would have complied automatically. But these were not normal circumstances. "I will be right back," I said instead. "I need to speak with someone first." Dad's face darkened. "Now is not the time for your networking, Tara. Show some respect." "This is not about networking," I replied, keeping my voice low. "This is about Michael." Before he could respond, I moved away, weaving through the crowd toward where I had last seen Agent Murray. Several officers I did not recognize stopped me with kind words about Michael, each interaction slowing my progress and increasing my anxiety about the developing situation. I spotted Murray near the side entrance, engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation with one of his team members. As I approached, his expression remained neutral, but I recognized the tension in his stance. "We have positive identification on 3 Sinaloa associates," he said without preamble when I reached him. "They are here gathering intelligence on the task force, documenting which officers from which jurisdictions are connected to the investigation." "Standard cartel procedure," I agreed, automatically slipping into agent mode. "Are we moving on them?" "We need to do this carefully," Murray cautioned. "Lot of armed officers here, emotional situation. The last thing we want is a confrontation inside a memorial service." I nodded, understanding the delicacy of the situation. "What do you need from me?" "Local cooperation. These officers do not know us, but they know you as Michael's sister. We need someone to liaise with the ranking officers present, brief them discreetly, and coordinate a quiet extraction of the subjects." It was the logical move tactically, but it would mean revealing my true role to everyone present, including my father. After years of secrecy, the revelation would come in the most public and emotionally charged setting possible. "There is no other way?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Murray shook his head. "Not with this many jurisdictions present and this little time. One of the subjects just received a text and appears to be preparing to leave. We need to move now." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "I will speak with Captain Winters. He is the highest-ranking officer from Michael's department." As I turned to find Winters, Murray placed a hand on my shoulder. "I am sorry about the timing, Reid. I know this is not how you wanted your family to find out." The genuine concern in his voice nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. "Just doing the job, sir," I managed, the professional mask slipping back into place. I spotted Captain Winters speaking with a group of officers near Michael's memorial display. As I approached, I became acutely aware of my father watching from across the room, his expression a mixture of confusion and disapproval at my apparent disregard for his instructions. Before I could reach Winters, however, events accelerated. One of the cartel observers had separated from the others and was moving rapidly toward an exit. Agent Peters, part of Murray's team, was tracking him while appearing to examine a floral arrangement. Murray made a decisive gesture, and his team began converging from different points around the church. The movement was subtle but purposeful. Anyone with tactical training would recognize it immediately. Several officers did notice, their hands instinctively moving toward their service weapons. The potential for chaos escalated with each passing second. Murray strode directly toward me, no longer attempting to be discreet. In that moment, I knew what needed to happen. The careful separation of my 2 lives was about to end. As Murray reached me, he spoke clearly enough for those nearby to hear. "Agent Reid, we need you now. Subjects are moving." The effect was immediate. Officers within earshot turned to stare. A ripple of confusion spread through the nearby mourners. And across the room, my father's face transformed into an expression I had never seen before, shock stripped of all his carefully maintained control. "Captain Winters," I said, turning to Michael's superior officer who had witnessed the exchange, "I am Special Agent Tara Reid, FBI. Those three men in the back are cartel associates here gathering intelligence on officers involved in the task force that Michael was part of. My team needs to remove them quietly without disrupting the memorial." To his credit, Winters processed this startling information quickly. "What do you need from us?" "A perimeter. Quiet containment. No visible movement that would alert them." Winters nodded, immediately signaling to his lieutenants while keeping his voice low. "Secure the exits. Plain clothes only. No uniforms approach the subjects." As Winters coordinated with his officers, I became aware of my father pushing through the crowd toward me, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. But there was no time to address the personal revelation. The operation had to come first. "Agent Reid," Murray called, "we need your confirmation on the primary subject." I moved swiftly to join Murray near the side entrance, where one of the cartel observers was being discreetly contained by Peters and another agent. The subject's eyes widened in recognition when he saw me not as Michael's sister, but as someone he recognized from intelligence photos. "Antonio Varga," I confirmed. "Mid-level Sinaloa lieutenant. Previously identified in the Harrisburg operation last year." The professional confirmation, delivered in front of dozens of police officers and my approaching father, permanently shattered any possibility of maintaining my cover. There was no going back now. Murray nodded. "We have the other two secured outside. Local FBI field office is sending transport." By now, my father had reached us, his face ashen. "Tara, what is going on here? Who are these people?" Before I could respond, Murray extended his hand. "Chief Reid. I am Supervisory Special Agent Desmond Murray, FBI Organized Crime Division. Your daughter is one of our most valuable agents. She has been instrumental in the larger investigation connected to the operation your son was involved in." Dad looked from Murray to me, decades of certainty crumbling before my eyes. "You are FBI?" "Actually, FBI. For 8 years, Dad," I confirmed, the weight of the lie finally lifting. "I could not tell you because of the classified nature of my work." Around us, officers who had known me only as Michael's sister, the dispatcher, were processing this revelation with varying degrees of surprise. Rodriguez, Michael's partner, actually laughed. "That explains a lot," he said. "Mike always got weird when we asked too many questions about you. Said you were just a dispatcher, but with this looked like he was enjoying some private joke." The mention of Michael brought the reality of the day crashing back. We were still at his memorial service. There would be time for personal reckonings later. "Captain Winters," I said, turning back to the operation at hand, "we need to complete this extraction without disrupting the memorial further. My brother deserves that respect." Winters nodded, immediately refocusing on the tactical situation. With practiced efficiency, the remaining cartel observers were quietly escorted from the church through side exits. The operation conducted so discreetly that most attendees remained unaware anything had happened. As the immediate crisis resolved, I found myself standing face to face with my father in a moment neither of us had prepared for. The man who had spent decades dismissing my career choices, diminishing my contributions, and relegating me to the background now stared at me as if seeing a stranger. "All this time," he said finally, his voice barely audible, "you let me believe you were just a dispatcher." "You never asked for details, Dad," I replied. "You assumed, and it was easier to let you believe what you wanted than to fight for recognition I was not allowed to explain." For perhaps the first time in my life, my father had no ready response. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had defined our family for decades had been upended in a matter of minutes, and he was still processing the implications. Officer after officer now approached, their earlier condolences replaced by professional respect and questions about my work. Each interaction seemed to further destabilize Dad's worldview, as men and women whose service he deeply respected treated me as a peer, even looking to me with deference regarding the security situation. Mom made her way to my side, tears streaming down her face. "I always knew you were doing something important. she whispered as she embraced me. Michael told me a little, though he said he was not supposed to know either. He figured it out, I admitted. I swore him to secrecy. He was so proud of you, she said. He used to tell me, Mom, you have no idea how badass Tara is. The use of Michael's actual words broke through my professional composure. For the first time since arriving for the memorial, I allowed myself to truly feel the loss of my brother, not just as family, but as the one person who had known both versions of me and valued them equally. As the memorial service transitioned to its conclusion, I found myself in an entirely new position within the Reid family narrative. No longer relegated to the background, I had become central to the unfolding story, not just as Michael's sister, but as FBI agent Reid, whose work intersected with his final case in ways no one could have anticipated. Dad stood alone near Michael's casket, his usual commanding presence diminished by shock and newfound uncertainty. For the first time, I recognized something in his expression that I had never seen directed toward me before. Respect tinged with confusion, and perhaps a dawning recognition of how profoundly he had misjudged his own daughter. With the cartel observers secured and transportation arranged, the immediate security threat had been neutralized. Murray pulled me aside as local FBI field agents took custody of the subjects. We will handle processing and initial interrogation, he assured me. You should stay with your family. This is still your brother's memorial. I nodded gratefully. The compartmentalization that had served me professionally for years now failing in the face of grief and emotional revelation. Thank you, sir. Take the time you need, Reid, he added. The case will be waiting when you are ready to return. As Murray and his team departed, I turned back to the memorial service, which had continued despite the discreet operation at its periphery. Most attendees remained unaware that anything unusual had occurred, their focus appropriately on honoring Michael. The same could not be said for the law enforcement officers present. Word had spread quickly through their ranks, and I found myself receiving nods of professional recognition from officers who had barely acknowledged me earlier. The transformation in how I was perceived was immediate and startling. Captain Winters approached as I rejoined my family. Agent Reid, he said formally, then softened his tone. Tara, I wish we had known. Michael never indicated. He was protecting my cover, I explained. Even family members are typically not informed about undercover assignments or classified operations. Of course. Winters nodded understandingly. I just want you to know that what you did today, putting the operation needs above your personal situation, it is exactly what Michael would have done. You two were more alike than I realized. His words struck a chord. Throughout my life, Michael had been held up as the model Reid, the one who embodied all the family values of service and sacrifice. To be seen as similar to him, particularly by his commanding officer, carried a validation I had never expected to receive. Thank you, Captain, I managed, emotion threatening to break through my professional demeanor. Winters hesitated, then added, there is something you should know. The task force Michael was part of, we have been coordinating with federal agencies for months. The intelligence that informed our operation came from. He paused. Well, I now suspect it may have come from your team. The implication was clear and hit me with physical force. My team's intelligence had directly contributed to the operation that had cost Michael his life. We did provide analysis to multi-jurisdictional task forces tracking Sinaloa distribution networks. I confirmed, the words feeling like ashes in my mouth. Operational details would have been sanitized before reaching local departments. Standard protocol. I understand compartmentalization. Winters assured me. I just thought you should know your work and Michael's were connected. You were fighting the same battle, just from different angles. As Winters moved away to oversee the transition to the cemetery portion of the service, I found myself standing alone, processing this new layer of connection and loss. The intelligence my team had gathered had helped shape the operation where Michael died. In trying to protect him by keeping my work secret, I had actually been working alongside him all along. The irony was painful yet somehow appropriate. Even separated by secrecy and different agencies, we had remained a team until the end. Dad approached hesitantly, his customary certainty replaced by an awkward tentativeness I had never witnessed in him before. "The service is moving to the cemetery," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We should ride together. As a family." The simple inclusion, so automatic for most families, but so meaningful in ours, felt like an olive branch extended across a chasm of misunderstanding. "I would like that," I replied. The cemetery service proceeded with full police honors, the 21-gun salute, the playing of taps, the ceremonial folding and presentation of the flag. Throughout these solemn rituals, I remained hyper-aware of the subtle shift in my position within both the family and the larger law enforcement community present. Officers who had previously seen me only as Michael's sister now approached with professional respect. Several quietly mentioned cases they had worked that had federal connections, suggesting points of professional intersection I had never been able to acknowledge before. "Your brother mentioned once that you had helped with the Wilson trafficking case," Detective Sanderson told me quietly. Said he could not explain how or why he knew that. "Makes sense now." These revelations created a strange dissonance. Grief for Michael intermingled with a belated recognition of my own professional identity. The latter felt almost inappropriate under the circumstances, yet it was undeniably transformative. Years of being diminished were being rewritten in real time. Dad observed these interactions with an unreadable expression. The man who had spent decades confidently assessing and categorizing everyone's contributions now seemed lost. His framework for understanding his own family fundamentally altered. As the cemetery service concluded and attendees began to disperse, several of Michael's closest colleagues gathered around our family to share more personal memories. Their stories revealed a side of my brother I had glimpsed but never fully known: his leadership on difficult cases, his mentorship of younger officers, his unwavering integrity. "He talked about you all the time," Officer Chin told me. "Always said his sister was the real brains of the Reid family. But we could never figure out why a dispatcher would need that many advanced degrees." She smiled sadly. "He knew, did not he?" "He figured it out," I confirmed. "Made me swear not to tell anyone that he knew." "Classic Michael," Rodriguez added. "Could keep a secret better than anyone." As the gathering thinned, Captain Winters approached our family once more. "We have organized a more informal reception at Michael's favorite restaurant." Nothing official. Just his close colleagues remembering him the way he would have wanted. Mom looked to Dad, who nodded. "We will be there," he confirmed, speaking for all of us as he always had. As we walked back to the family car, Dad fell into step beside me, maintaining an unusual silence. Finally, as we reached the vehicle, he spoke. "I do not know what to say to you," he admitted. The words clearly difficult for him. 8 years, Tara. 8 years of believing one thing about my own daughter, and now you know the truth," I finished. "Or part of it, at least. And the rest is still classified," I said gently. "Some of it always will be." He nodded slowly, processing this limitation. All those times I talked about real police work, about the front lines. His voice trailed off, the implicit apology hanging unspoken between us. "We are all on the front lines now, Dad," I replied. "Just different fronts in the same fight." For the first time that day, perhaps the first time in years, my father really looked at me. Not as his daughter who had chosen a support role, not as the family member who had strayed from the Reid tradition, but as a professional whose service he was finally beginning to understand. "Your brother knew, did not he?" he asked suddenly. "About the FBI?" "Yes," I admitted. "He figured it out about 3 years ago." Dad laughed unexpectedly, a sound startling in its genuineness. "He always could read people better than me." Stubborn old cop, set in my ways. The momentary lightness faded. "He was proud of you, Tara." He told me that, though he never explained why. Said someday I would understand. As we drove to the restaurant, I looked out at the town where both Michael and I had grown up, where we had forged such different paths that ultimately converged in ways none of us could have predicted. The grief remained overwhelming, but alongside it grew something new, a sense that Michael's death, however tragic, had finally allowed the truth of my life to emerge from the shadows. The barriers that had separated the compartments of my existence were dissolving, bringing pain but also an unexpected liberation. For the first time since joining the FBI, I could begin to imagine a future where I would not have to choose between my professional identity and my place in the Reid family legacy. The days following Michael's memorial service unfolded in a strange new reality. The carefully maintained separation between my FBI identity and my family life had collapsed entirely, leaving us all to navigate unfamiliar terrain. Dad oscillated between periods of stunned silence and bursts of questions about my work, most of which I still could not fully answer. 8 years. He would repeat, the number becoming a measure of his failure to truly know his daughter. 8 years in the FBI, and I never suspected. Mom adjusted more readily, perhaps because she had already suspected something beyond my dispatcher cover story. Michael hinted at it, she admitted during a quiet moment alone. He said you were doing important work that you could not talk about. I assumed it was some kind of administrative security position. 3 days after the memorial, I sat with my father on the back porch of the family home. The evening was cool, the sun setting behind the same trees that had shadowed our childhood games. Dad nursed a glass of the whiskey he reserved for special occasions, its level notably lower than when he had started. "Why did you not tell me?" he finally asked. The question that had clearly been weighing on him since the revelation. Was it really all classified, or was it? He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. It was both. I answered honestly. The work itself is classified, yes. But I also knew how you would react. Or thought I knew. How do you think I would have reacted? His voice held genuine curiosity rather than his usual defensiveness. With skepticism, I said. With questions about whether it was real FBI work or just some desk job with a fancy title. With comparisons to Michael's more visible service. Dad winced, recognition flashing across his face. I would have done exactly that, would not I? You had been doing it my entire life, Dad. Real police work happens on the streets. Remember that one? You said it every time I expressed interest in the investigative side of law enforcement. He looked down at his glass. I did not realize how often I said that. Or how it sounded to you. It was your measuring stick, I explained. The standard against which all service was judged. And by that measure, anything I was interested in always fell short. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misunderstanding settling between us. When Murray called you one of our most valuable agents, Dad said finally, was he just being diplomatic because of the circumstances? The question surprised me with its vulnerability. No, I answered truthfully. I lead a specialized analytical team focusing on cartel operations along the East Coast. My unit has been tracking the Sinaloa networks for the past year. The same people Michael was investigating? I nodded. Different level, different angle, but yes. The intelligence my team gathered likely informed the operation Michael was part of. Dad's expression shifted as he processed this connection. So you and Michael were working the same case without even knowing it. That is how it works sometimes, I said. Compartmentalization keeps operations secure, but it also means the left hand does not always know what the right is doing. Could you have warned him? The question came suddenly. Pain evident in his voice. If you had told him what you knew about these people, could it have made a difference? The question hit me with physical force, voicing the doubt that had haunted me since learning of Michael's death. I have asked myself that every day since it happened, I admitted. The honest answer is I do not know. Most of what my team knew was big picture, money flow, organizational structure. distribution patterns. The tactical details of his operation would have been handled at the local level. Dad nodded slowly, accepting this without the accusation I had feared. He was always careful, methodical. Whatever happened that day, I do not think it was because he lacked information. The absence of blame felt like absolution for a guilt I had been carrying silently. He was the best officer I knew, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Not just because he was my brother, but because he truly understood that good police work is about protecting people, not just making arrests. He learned that from you, I think, Dad said unexpectedly. All those arguments you two used to have about criminal justice reform, about community policing, he listened, even when it seemed like he was just arguing. This revelation, that I had influenced Michael's approach to policing just as he had supported my career path, created a new dimension to my grief. We had shaped each other in ways neither of us had fully acknowledged. There is something I need to show you, Dad said, rising with sudden purpose. He disappeared into the house. Returning minutes later with a worn leather folder I recognized as his important documents case. Michael gave me this about 6 months ago, he explained, extracting an envelope. Said I should only open it if something happened to him. I found it last night. He handed me the envelope, my name written on the front in Michael's distinctive handwriting. With unsteady fingers. I opened it to find a letter and a small flash drive. Dear Tara, the letter began. If you are reading this, something has gone sideways and Dad finally knows about your real job. Knowing him. He is struggling with it, so I figured I would help both of you out. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. I have been collecting evidence of your badassery for years, news articles about cases I know you worked on, redacted FBI commendations I dug up. That interview you gave disguised as a federal analyst for the Justice Department newsletter. It is all on the flash drive, organized and annotated for Dad's benefit. Consider it my gift to both of you. You get the recognition you deserve, and he gets to see what his daughter has really been doing while he thought she was answering phones. The letter continued with personal messages, inside jokes, and finally, I always knew you would outrank me someday, Commander. I just wish I could be there to see Dad's face when he figures it out. Love you, Mikey. I handed the letter to my father, watching as he read Michael's words. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. He made a whole presentation, Dad said, holding up the flash drive. Complete with video introduction. Said I should watch it if I ever needed to understand what real law enforcement looks like in the 21st century. The intentionality of Michael's actions, preparing this material. Anticipating both my need for recognition and Dad's need for concrete evidence, was so perfectly, painfully him. Even in death, he was trying to bridge the gap between his father and sister. We could watch it together, I suggested. When you are ready. Dad nodded, carefully returning the flash drive to the envelope. Not tonight, but soon, as darkness fell completely. We sat in a silence more comfortable than any I could remember sharing with my father. The reconciliation between us remained incomplete, the habits of a lifetime not easily changed. But Michael's final gift had created an opening, a possibility of a new understanding. I need to return to work next week, I said eventually. The case is still active. The case connected to Michael's? Yes. Different aspects, higher-level targets, but connected. Dad considered this. Will you be able to tell me about it? When it is over? Some of it. I said honestly. Not all, but more than before. He nodded, accepting these limitations in a way the old Chief Reid never would have. I want to know what you can share. About this case. About your work. I have missed 8 years already. The acknowledgement of loss, not just of Michael, but of the relationship we might have had if not for misunderstanding and secrecy, hung between us. It will not bring him back, I said softly. No, Dad agreed. But it might help us honor him properly. Both sides of his legacy, the visible service everyone saw. And the brother who supported his sister's invisible battles. 2 days later, I prepared to return to Washington. My leave was ending, and the investigation needed my attention. The cartel members identified at the memorial had provided valuable intelligence under questioning, opening new avenues in our ongoing case. Mom hugged me tightly at the door. "Be safe," she whispered. "And call more often, even if you cannot tell us everything." Dad stood awkwardly to the side, our new understanding still fragile and uncertain. As I turned to say goodbye, he surprised me by pulling me into an embrace. "I am proud of you," he said, the words I had waited decades to hear. "Not because you are FBI instead of a dispatcher, but because you found your own way to serve, even when I could not see its value." "Thank you, Dad," I managed, the simple acknowledgement more healing than I had anticipated. "Michael knew," he added as he released me. He understood what I am only beginning to learn, that the Reid legacy is not about wearing a specific uniform or carrying a particular badge. It is about the commitment to service, whatever form that takes. As I drove away from my childhood home, grief and loss still dominated my emotional landscape. Michael was gone. The brother who had been my ally and advocate since childhood. That hole would never be filled. But alongside the grief grew something unexpected, a sense of integration. The compartmentalized aspects of my identity were finally converging into a whole person. Agent Reid and Tara the sister were no longer separate entities, but facets of the same life. Returning to my team the following Monday, I found new purpose in the continuation of our investigation. The case that had tangentially cost Michael his life was now personal in a way I had never allowed my work to become before. "Welcome back, Agent Reid." Murray greeted me as I entered our secure briefing room. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded, surveying the case files and intelligence reports spread across the table. "More than ready, sir." "Your brother's task force did good work," he said. "Laid the groundwork for what we are doing now." "I thought you should know that." "I do know it," I replied. "And I intend to finish what he started." The investigation would continue for months, eventually leading to the indictment of key cartel figures operating throughout the eastern seaboard. Michael's name would appear in the official reports alongside mine, different agencies, different roles, but part of the same fight. On my desk at Quantico now sits a photograph of Michael in his uniform, next to my FBI credentials. No longer a secret to be hidden, but a shared legacy of service that took different forms but stemmed from the same source. Dad calls weekly now, asking what he can about my cases, accepting the limitations of classification, and slowly learning about the daughter he never truly knew. The reconciliation remains a work in progress, the habits of a lifetime not easily changed. But Michael's final gift created a foundation for a new relationship built on mutual respect rather than measuring against a single standard of service. In the end, what my father finally understood, what Michael had known all along, was that courage and sacrifice take many forms. Some are visible and celebrated with medals and ceremonies. Others remain in the shadows, unseen but no less vital. Both are necessary. Both are valuable. Both are real. Have you ever felt underestimated by family who did not understand your true capabilities or contributions? I would love to hear your stories of recognition delayed or denied in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic experiences about finding validation in unexpected places. And if you know someone who might connect with this journey of being seen for who you truly are, share this video with them. Remember that true service is not defined by visibility or titles, but by impact and commitment to something larger than yourself. Thank you for listening to my story today.